You don't know me, and maybe that's fine, because on this channel, nothing but the truth will be revealed. Subscribe to know the real story. Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves, because what you're about to hear could signal a turning point inside the Kremlin itself. Behind the carefully controlled image of unity, cracks are beginning to show. Tonight's story isn't about the battlefield alone, it's about power, pressure, and a Russian leader who may be ready to quit on Vladimir Putin. If this is true, it could reshape the political future of Russia and send shockwaves far beyond its borders. Reports emerging from multiple political analysts and insiders suggest that a high ranking Russian official is reportedly considering stepping down, a development that could send shockwaves throughout the Kremlin and alter the perception of Putin's authority, both domestically and internationally. This potential resignation is being described not as a routine personnel change, but as a rare and highly significant signal of internal unrest, as it is unusual for figures at such a high level to publicly or even privately question their loyalty to the president. The very notion that someone so closely associated with Putin might be ready to abandon their post has fueled speculation about growing divisions within the leadership, raising questions about who is influencing policy decisions and how stable the inner circle truly remains. According to sources familiar with the matter, the motivations behind this potential departure are complex and multifaceted, involving a combination of strategic, political, and personal factors. On the strategic front, the ongoing military engagements and their increasingly uncertain outcomes have placed immense pressure on Russia's top officials, forcing them to confront the reality of decisions that have far-reaching consequences for national security and international relations. Analysts argue that frustration over these challenges, particularly the management of the conflict and the perception of repeated setbacks, has contributed significantly to this rare move as officials weigh the costs of staying aligned with a leadership that may be losing ground. Adding another layer to this dynamic are internal political pressures that stem from a highly centralized system of governance. Loyalty has always been a currency in Russian politics, and stepping away from a leader like Putin carries both risk and weight. Sources indicate that discussions behind closed doors have focused on how long it is safe to remain in a position of influence before political blame or public scrutiny becomes unavoidable. This tension creates a scenario in which top officials must constantly calculate whether remaining in office will enhance their influence or expose them to future vulnerabilities. The potential resignation, therefore, is being interpreted not just as a personal decision, but as a reflection of broader uncertainty and anxiety permeating the corridors of power. Financial and economic considerations appear to be another motivating factor. Sanctions, economic slowdowns, and increased scrutiny from the global community have put additional strain on Russia's leadership, making the stakes of maintaining positions of authority even higher. Insider reports suggest that these pressures are forcing high-level officials to reconsider their careers and their legacies, particularly as they witness the consequence of policies they may have once supported. The combination of external pressure and internal discontent creates a volatile environment in which decisions that might have seemed unthinkable only months ago are now being seriously considered. Political commentators emphasize the symbolic significance of this potential resignation. In systems like Russia's, where power is typically projected as monolithic and unwavering, any hint of dissent or withdrawal is magnified, drawing attention from domestic observers, international analysts, and the media. The fact that a major figure might be preparing to quit is therefore not merely a personnel matter, It is a statement about confidence, influence, and the balance of power within the leadership. Such an act could embolden others, provoke speculation about upcoming shifts, and even prompt questions about the overall stability of Putin's administration. Adding urgency to this situation is the timing, which coincides with heightened scrutiny of Russia's policies and actions both at home and abroad. Observers note that the geopolitical climate, coupled with internal pressures, creates a perfect storm in which a resignation would resonate far beyond the Kremlin walls. The narrative is compelling. The high ranking official facing mounting pressure and uncertain outcomes may be preparing to break ranks, signaling to the world that even the most steadfast alliances in Russian politics are not immune to strain. Ultimately, the emergence of these reports has captured the attention of political analysts and the public alike, who are closely watching for any confirmation or further indications that this potential resignation is more than just a rumor. The stakes are extraordinarily high, and the implications of such a move, should it occur, would be felt across Russia's political landscape, influencing perceptions of power, loyalty, and the direction of the country's leadership in the months ahead. Frustration within Russia's political elite appears to be reaching unprecedented levels, fueled by a combination of military setbacks, economic turmoil, and the increasing weight of international pressure. This growing discontent is particularly striking among senior officials who have long operated under the expectation of unwavering loyalty to President Putin. Observers note that these individuals are now confronting the stark reality that remaining aligned with the current leadership entails escalating personal and professional risks. The mounting frustration is not merely about policy disagreements, it reflects deeper concerns about accountability, reputation, and the sustainability of Russia's political and economic trajectory. As tensions rise behind closed doors, whispers of dissent and disillusionment are becoming impossible to ignore, signaling potential fractures within the Kremlin's traditionally tight knit inner circle. Insiders suggest that military developments have been a central driver of this frustration. High ranking officials are reportedly troubled by repeated operational failures and strategic miscalculations, particularly those that have exposed Russia to both domestic criticism and international scrutiny. The perception that decisions are leading to diminishing returns and growing instability has created a sense of urgency and, in some cases, fear among key figures. Analysts argue that frustration is compounded by the fact that many officials invested their careers in the assumption of long-term strategic success, only to find themselves navigating a landscape of uncertainty and repeated setbacks. This tension, when paired with the heavy expectation of loyalty, sets the stage for a unique and volatile political environment where discontent is simmering just beneath the surface. Economic pressures have intensified the internal strain as sanctions, inflation, and resource challenges continue to bite. Senior leaders are reportedly frustrated not only by the tangible economic hardships affecting the population, but also by the reputational and strategic consequences for Russia on the global stage. These economic stresses have amplified perceptions of mismanagement and have heightened anxieties about personal accountability. In a political system where the consequences of failure can be severe, the economic environment has become both a catalyst and a magnifying glass for frustrations that might have otherwise remained private. The combination of fiscal pressure and geopolitical isolation creates an environment in which disillusionment is not just likely but almost inevitable among those closest to power. The human dimension of this frustration is equally significant. Sources close to the Kremlin suggest that long term stress, conflicting priorities, and the sense of being trapped in a high stakes political game are contributing to a sense of personal and professional exhaustion. Leaders who once projected confidence are reportedly questioning the wisdom of continued service, especially when they perceive that their influence is being undermined or their actions are increasingly constrained. The psychological weight of constant scrutiny, coupled with a sense of limited agency, has transformed routine decision making into a high risk endeavor. In this context, frustration is both rational and strategic, signaling an urgent need to reassess loyalties and personal calculations. Political analysts point out that these frustrations are further magnified by the symbolic and practical stakes of Russia's current situation. Every setback, every sanction, and every failed policy reverberates across the leadership, reinforcing the perception that the status quo is unsustainable. Officials are reportedly aware that remaining passive could have long term consequences for their careers, influence, and even personal safety, creating a paradox in which the very act of loyalty can be perceived as risky. The potential consequences of such frustration are not confined to individual resignations, they threaten to create broader ripples within the system, as one voice of dissent may embolden others and spark wider reconsideration of the leadership's direction. Timing is critical in this scenario. Analysts highlight that the convergence of military, economic, and political pressures has created a unique moment in which internal frustrations are more likely to translate into tangible actions. The stakes have never been higher, and the world is watching closely for signs that Russia's inner circle may no longer be as united as it once appeared. Each moment of hesitation or disagreement could escalate into a dramatic shift, making the current period one of intense scrutiny and high stakes political maneuvering within the Kremlin. Ultimately, the growing frustration among Russia's senior officials reflects a complex interplay of strategic, economic, and personal pressures, creating a volatile environment in which loyalty, ambition, and survival are constantly being recalibrated. Observers emphasize that understanding this frustration is key to interpreting potential shifts in Russia's leadership dynamics and the broader trajectory of the country's political future. The question of loyalty within Russia's top leadership has never been more critical as signs emerge that even the most trusted figures may be reconsidering their alignment with President Putin. In a political system long characterized by centralized control and an expectation of absolute fidelity, the notion that senior officials could begin to question their allegiance is both startling and consequential. Observers suggest that loyalty in Russia is not merely a matter of personal preference, but a complex interplay of survival, influence, and strategic calculation. When the inner circle begins to display uncertainty, it sends a clear message that the stability of leadership is being tested from within, raising the stakes for every decision made at the highest level. Analysts argue that loyalty is increasingly being influenced by the broader context of Russia's domestic and international pressures. Prolonged military engagements with mixed outcomes, coupled with economic constraints and mounting international scrutiny, have created an environment in which remaining firmly committed carries both symbolic and practical risks. Officials are reportedly weighing the long term implications of their allegiance, considering whether continued support enhances their authority or exposes them to blame should circumstances worsen. This balancing act between loyalty and self preservation has become a defining challenge for those at the top, as even a perceived misstep could have significant personal and political repercussions. Insider reports suggest that the erosion of loyalty is being driven not only by external pressures but also by the growing perception that decision making is increasingly centralized and rigid. Many high ranking officials feel constrained, frustrated by their inability to influence critical policies or redirect strategic priorities. This lack of agency has fueled discontent as seasoned political figures recognize that their careers and reputations are increasingly tied to decisions over which they have limited control. The resulting tension underscores a key paradox in an environment where loyalty is expected. The very structures that demand fidelity can also generate disillusionment, creating openings for dissent that were previously unimaginable. Financial and reputational concerns further complicate the picture. In a system where sanctions, economic instability, and global scrutiny are escalating, the personal stakes for top officials are exceptionally high. Maintaining loyalty to leadership that is perceived to be faltering carries inherent risks, particularly when external pressures amplify the consequences of strategic failures. Insiders suggest that these factors are prompting serious internal discussions about the long term viability of remaining closely aligned with Putin, highlighting a dynamic in which loyalty is no longer a given but a calculated choice with potentially profound implications. Observers note that loyalty is also being tested by shifting perceptions of legitimacy and public confidence. As ordinary citizens express dissatisfaction with economic conditions and political stagnation, senior leaders are reportedly taking note of the widening gap between official narratives and lived realities. The awareness that public sentiment may increasingly challenge established authority adds an additional layer of pressure as officials contemplate how far their support can or should extend in a climate of uncertainty. This interplay between internal decision making and external perception is intensifying scrutiny on every leader, heightening the importance of carefully navigating loyalty while safeguarding personal and political capital. The potential fragility of loyalty in Russia's leadership carries broader strategic implications. Analysts emphasize that even small signs of wavering allegiance can reverberate throughout the political ecosystem, influencing the calculations of other officials and altering the balance of power. A single high profile act of dissent has the potential to embolden others, creating a ripple effect that challenges the perception of cohesion that has historically underpinned Putin's authority. As tensions mount, the stakes of loyalty are amplified, transforming what might once have been a routine affirmation of allegiance into a high stakes strategic decision with ramifications both inside and beyond the Kremlin walls. The evolving landscape of loyalty within Russia's political elite reflects a complex mixture of strategic uncertainty, personal ambition, and external pressure. Observers highlight that this dynamic is critical for understanding the potential trajectory of the country's leadership and the underlying tensions that could reshape the balance of power in the months ahead. The interplay of risk, reward, and perception is making loyalty a fluid rather than fixed attribute, and the consequences of this shift are being watched closely by political analysts worldwide. The possibility of a high ranking Russian official resigning from Putin's inner circle has the potential to trigger profound political shockwaves, both within the Kremlin and across the global stage. In a system traditionally marked by centralized control and tightly managed narratives, any hint of dissent or departure is magnified, taking on symbolic and strategic significance far beyond the individual involved. Political analysts emphasize that such a move would not merely represent a personnel change, it would signal a crack in the image of unity and stability that the Russian leadership has carefully cultivated for decades. The mere suggestion that loyalty at the highest level may be faltering has already sparked speculation about internal instability and the potential for broader systemic repercussions. Insiders indicate that the implications of a senior resignation are multifaceted, touching on both domestic governance and international perception. Domestically, the departure of a key figure could embolden other officials to voice private grievances or reconsider their positions, potentially setting off a chain reaction of uncertainty and recalibration within the leadership hierarchy. In a political ecosystem where signals of loyalty and obedience are closely monitored, the act of stepping away could inspire a reassessment of alliances and hierarchies, shifting the balance of influence and authority in ways that are difficult to predict. The ripple effects of even a single resignation can be far reaching, altering the calculations of both remaining insiders and those on the periphery of power. From an international perspective, a resignation of this magnitude would be interpreted as a tangible sign of internal strain, providing foreign analysts and governments with evidence that Russia's decision making apparatus may be under stress. Observers note that external audiences are highly attuned to signals of division within the Kremlin, and the exit of a prominent official could influence diplomatic negotiations, strategic planning, and global perceptions of Russia's stability. The impact is magnified by the already tense geopolitical environment, in which every shift in internal dynamics can have cascading effects on international relations and security calculations. The timing of a potential resignation further amplifies its significance. Russia currently faces multiple pressures, ranging from economic sanctions and public dissatisfaction to ongoing military challenges, creating a scenario in which any indication of internal fracture is particularly destabilizing. Analysts suggest that the combination of high stakes and heightened scrutiny means that even a single act of dissent could trigger amplified reactions from both domestic actors and international observers. In such an environment, the departure of a major figure is likely to generate a media storm, fueling speculation about the health of the leadership and the future direction of Russian policy. Political commentators also point out that the symbolic value of a resignation should not be underestimated. In systems where power is projected as monolithic, any disruption in the narrative of unity becomes a point of leverage, prompting discussion and debate both inside and outside government circles. Observers highlight that the act of stepping down carries more than practical implications. It communicates vulnerability, uncertainty, and potential shifts in influence, creating a scenario in which perception becomes as important as reality. Adding to the intrigue is the question of who might follow suit. In tightly knit political networks, one high profile exit can embolden others, leading to a cascade of resignations or public expressions of dissent. Analysts caution that this domino effect is not hypothetical. It has precedent in various political systems where internal cracks eventually became public crises. Each decision by a senior official to distance themselves from leadership is interpreted as a signal influencing not only colleagues but also the broader political narrative and the international understanding of power dynamics within Russia. Ultimately, the potential resignation of a key Russian leader is far more than an isolated event. It represents a significant stress test for the Kremlin's cohesion, authority, and credibility. Observers emphasize that monitoring these developments provides crucial insight into the stability of Russia's leadership and the potential for shifts that could reverberate across both domestic and global political landscapes. The timing of a potential resignation from a high ranking Russian official carries extraordinary significance as it intersects with a period of heightened political, economic, and military pressure. In recent months, the Kremlin has faced mounting challenges both domestically and internationally and the possibility that a key figure could step away now would amplify existing uncertainties. Analysts suggest that timing is not incidental, it is a critical factor that could determine whether a single resignation remains an isolated event or triggers a broader reevaluation of loyalty and authority within Russia's leadership. The convergence of internal and external pressures creates an environment in which every action or inaction takes on amplified meaning, making the timing of such a move strategically consequential. Observers note that the ongoing military conflicts have created a particularly sensitive backdrop for leadership decisions. Setbacks on the battlefield, combined with operational miscalculations, have generated frustration and unease among senior officials. In this context, the departure of a high ranking figure would be interpreted not merely as a personal choice, but as a commentary on the state of the nation's strategic direction. Analysts argue that timing amplifies the stakes, leaving during a period of crisis signals a lack of confidence in current policies, sending a powerful message both to colleagues and to external observers. The perception that even the most trusted leaders are willing to step away at this juncture adds urgency to the narrative, raising questions about the resilience and cohesion of Russia's inner circle. Economic conditions further heighten the importance of timing. Sanctions, inflation, and resource constraints have increasingly strained the country's domestic situation, creating a context in which political stability is intimately linked to economic performance. High ranking officials are reportedly acutely aware of the implications of economic turmoil on public perception and their own reputations. A resignation at a time when the population is already feeling the effects of financial pressure sends a signal that the leadership may be struggling to maintain control, intensifying domestic and international scrutiny. The timing of such a decision, in this sense, is as much about perception management as it is about personal or professional considerations. The broader geopolitical landscape also plays a role in magnifying the timing of a potential exit. Russia's position on the global stage is increasingly precarious, with heightened tensions in diplomatic, military, and economic arenas. Analysts emphasize that any shift within the Kremlin is closely monitored by foreign governments, intelligence agencies, and international media, meaning that a resignation during a sensitive period could have ripple effects far beyond Russia's borders. Timing in this case transforms what might otherwise be a private decision into a strategic signal, influencing both allies and adversaries and shaping global interpretations of Russia's political stability. Insider reports suggest that the calculus behind the timing of a resignation is also informed by personal and professional considerations. Senior officials must weigh the potential risks of leaving too early against the dangers of remaining aligned during periods of instability. The decision to step away at a critical moment is therefore not spontaneous. It is a calculated move that reflects a sophisticated understanding of power dynamics, risk management, and long-term strategy. Analysts highlight that such decisions are rarely made lightly as the consequences extend beyond the individual to affect colleagues, policies, and the broader narrative of governance. The element of timing also interacts with media perception and public discourse. In an environment where information is closely monitored and often tightly controlled, the timing of a resignation can shape narratives, influence speculation, and alter the trajectory of political debates. Observers note that even the suggestion of an imminent departure can create waves, prompting speculation about who may follow, the motivations behind the move, and the potential consequences for leadership cohesion. Therefore, becomes a tool of influence, amplifying the impact of the resignation and ensuring that its implications are felt across multiple domains. Ultimately, the timing of a senior Russian official's potential resignation underscores the delicate interplay between strategy, perception, and circumstance. Analysts emphasize that when such a move occurs during periods of heightened pressure, it is magnified exponentially, transforming an individual decision into a critical moment of political significance. The precise moment chosen reflects careful calculation and carries consequences that extend well beyond the individual, influencing perceptions, decisions, and stability across Russia's political landscape and the international arena. The potential departure of a high ranking Russian leader carries profound implications for the future of Russia's political landscape, signaling not just an individual decision, but a possible shift in the balance of power at the highest levels. Analysts emphasize that such a move would reverberate far beyond the Kremlin, influencing both domestic governance and international perceptions of Russia's stability and strategic direction. In a system where centralized control and projected unity have long been pillars of authority, even the smallest crack can quickly magnify, creating uncertainty and speculation about what comes next. The implications are both practical and symbolic, challenging assumptions about loyalty, control, and the trajectory of Russian politics. Observers point out that the departure of a senior official at this critical juncture would serve as a signal to others within the leadership. In tightly controlled political systems, one act of dissent or disengagement often emboldens others who have been privately questioning their alignment or assessing the risks of continued loyalty. The ripple effect can be dramatic, prompting additional resignations or subtle realignments of influence within the inner circle. Analysts note that these movements are rarely isolated. They reflect broader patterns of recalibration as political actors seek to protect their authority, legacy, and personal security in an increasingly volatile environment. The international ramifications of such a resignation are equally significant. Governments, intelligence agencies, and strategic analysts around the world closely monitor Russia's internal dynamics, and a high profile departure would be interpreted as evidence of potential instability. Allies and adversaries alike would recalibrate their diplomatic, economic, and military strategies based on perceived vulnerabilities within the Kremlin. The exit of a key figure could therefore affect not only domestic power structures, but also the global calculus surrounding Russia's foreign policy, signaling that decisions previously considered firm may now be subject to uncertainty or change. Economic pressures add another layer to the implications of such a move, with sanctions, inflation, and resource constraints creating ongoing domestic challenges. The resignation of a major leader would amplify concerns about Russia's ability to effectively manage internal and external pressures. Analysts suggest that such a departure could undermine confidence among bureaucrats, investors, and the general public, heightening the perception that the country's leadership is fragmented or struggling to maintain cohesion. The timing of the resignation, combined with existing economic stresses, therefore magnifies its significance, transforming an individual decision into a broader statement about governance and resilience. Public perception also plays a critical role in shaping the consequences of a high level resignation. Citizens, long accustomed to narratives of unity and strength, would likely interpret the departure as a warning sign, prompting speculation about the effectiveness and stability of current leadership. In modern political environments where media and social networks amplify events rapidly, the symbolic power of a resignation can outweigh even concrete policy outcomes. Observers note that the act of leaving, particularly during a period of heightened scrutiny or tension, communicates vulnerability, shifts narratives, and reshapes expectations about the future of governance in ways that are difficult to contain. Strategists further highlight that the implications extend to the dynamics of succession and influence within the Kremlin. The departure of a senior official alters calculations about who holds sway over policy, who may rise to fill vacuums of power, and how factions within the leadership align themselves moving forward. Analysts argue that even subtle shifts can have cascading effects as new alliances form and previous power structures are challenged. The departure, therefore, is not merely a personal choice, but a catalyst for potential realignment, signaling to observers and insiders alike that the Kremlin's political equilibrium is in flux. Ultimately, the potential resignation of a key Russian leader encapsulates a moment of high stakes uncertainty with far reaching consequences. The move would influence perceptions of stability, test the loyalty of others, impact economic and international considerations, and reshape internal power dynamics, making it a critical event to monitor for anyone seeking to understand the evolving trajectory of Russia's leadership and political future. So keep your eyes on this moment. If a major Russian leader truly walks away from Putin, it won't be just a resignation, it will be a warning flare from inside the Kremlin, a sign that power is shifting, fear is spreading, and the future of Russian leadership may be entering its most uncertain chapter yet. Stay alert, stay informed, and remember, when those closest to power start looking for the exit, history is usually about to turn the page.